Hi folks, it's Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, and I'm here with Dr. Martin Cooper, founder of Dyna LLC, Motorola veteran, and the wireless industry pioneer, widely considered the father of the portable cellular telephone. Dr. Cooper, thanks for joining us.
Hi, call me Marty.
Your work at Motorola in the 1950s and 60s included things like wirelessly controlled traffic signals and police radios and other things that at the time may have been considered more conventional than the project you would ultimately spearhead that we're talking about today. So, despite this, Motorola became convinced of the need for a handheld portable cellular telephone, and despite the fact that no revenues would be generated from that project for what I've read is about 20 years. So my question is, was it you who advocated this project? And if so, how did you manage to get the company on board and the people you ended up working with as well?
Well, I'll tell you, Michael, it wasn't easy.
I bet.
It's, really, Motorola's motivation at that time, we were the leader in the two-way radio business.
Right.
Mobile radio. And the essence of that business is spectrum, just as it is with cellular today. And we were running out of spectrum, and our main motivation, the motivation of the company, was somehow to acquire more spectrum for land mobile radio. The FCC was prepared to convert a lot of TV spectrum and a lot of what they called high frequency then, it's not high anymore, to land mobile purposes, but they were looking for something that would change the future. More efficient use of the spectrum, new services, and along comes AT&T, and they said, "Oh, we'll take care of everything. We've got this new thing we call cellular telephony, and we will not only provide a car telephone service, but we'll also take care of land mobile and air to ground. So just turn it all over to us. We'll be a monopoly, and the FCC won't have to worry about these things." Well, we weren't very happy about that.
Of course.
Because we would essentially been out of business. But aside from the monopoly aspect, the idea of car telephones was totally anathema to us, because we were already getting into the portable devices, and we discovered that once people have a portable device, they can't live without it. We're talking about commercial people now. You know, we'd walk down the aisles at an airport, and you see the airport employees with their handheld two-way radios in their hands. It was like part of their operating procedures. So we got the message. People are naturally, fundamentally mobile. And so Motorola took AT&T on at the FCC. But you understand that our bread and butter was two-way radios.
Of course.
This cellular thing was something new. So I was the Lone Ranger at that time. I was the maverick. And little by little, I worked on the management, and the real tipping point was when we produced that first portable cellular telephone.
And I understand when you had produced it, the first call that you or anyone made on a portable cellular telephone was to your chief rival at the Bell Labs.
Well, it was serendipitous, but yes, that is what happened. I was talking to a reporter, and it was the first public call we'd ever made, and we were very nervous about the fact that, was this thing going to work?
Right.
Never mind were we going to do anything earth-shaking. But I just thought of, a good idea would be to call Joel Engel.
And so here you are with a handheld device that is, many times smaller than that. You're walking down the streets of New York. You're talking to your chief rival, announcing to him that you've beaten him to it. What was his response? And did you maintain a relationship from that point onward, or no?
Well, the response was silence. So he actually was taken aback. He doesn't remember that phone call, and I guess I can't blame him. But they certainly were not pleased. AT&T, their viewpoint was that we were an annoyance, They were the biggest company in the world. They had Bell Laboratories, and we were this little upstart in Chicago. So they really didn't think that we amounted to anything at that time.
In the same interview where I read that story, it was an interview with the MIT Technology Review. You mentioned that you let people on the streets try out the same device in New York City on that day. Do you remember anything of the sort, or what it was like for those people?
The thing that we observed was that people were astounded. You know how are you a New Yorker?
I am, in fact, originally. Yes.
New Yorkers are blasé. You're not like we West Coast people. You walk down the street and people look right through you. Isn't that right?
It's true, absolutely, yeah. No,
we're stopping and staring at us because at that time there were no cordless phones, no cell phones. So here you had this guy dialing a number on a phone. It was quite astounding. And shortly thereafter, we went up to the top of the Hilton and we did a press conference.
Yes.
And one of the reporters said, "Well, can I call my mother in Australia?" And she dials this number, and talk about being astounded, the idea of talking at the other side of the earth from a little handheld phone.
Right.
Little did she know that the wireless part of that phone call was from the Hilton to across the street.
You had a cell site set up on a neighboring building?
That's exactly right.
In the same interview, you said that the U.S. would ultimately have a more effective telecom industry because the winning standards were determined by competition and not committee. And standards we're talking about, CDMA versus GSM and TDMA, I guess, at the time. This was a 2001 interview. Do you think, it's 15 years later, do you think that prediction has come true?
Well, so far it has. Just think about how it's evolved. We started out with what was called amps,
yes,
which was a derivative of what AT&T came up with. We took them on a whole bunch of the individual details of this thing. But the bottom line is we had a structure, and that lasted for well over 10 years. And then there were at least 4 or 5 new air interfaces that came into play, all competing with each other.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure that the best man won, but the bottom line is we ended up with 2 basic systems, GSM, which the Europeans championed, and CDMA, which was championed in the U.S., and that competition went on for a number of years.
Yeah.
And what evolved out of that is LTE. And I have to tell you, Michael, it's not the end. LTE is going to evolve for a while, but we are going to have new air interfaces, and there are going to be lots of changes in this industry.
There's been some developments in the past 5 years and in the past 25 in terms of smartphone platforms. Just because we spend a lot of time at Pocketnow talking about smartphones in addition to the tablets and wearables. And sure, we've seen a consolidation from a wide availability of choices from BlackBerry to Palm, to Symbian and so on, to these 2 main players, iOS and Android. And a lot of people say that was inevitable all the time, and that's just the way it's going to be. Do you agree that that's the best thing for the industry, or that is inevitable, or do you think that it's become less compelling as a result?
Well, I do. I hate the concept of treating us all like we're statistics.
Yeah.
I think that every person is different from every other person, and when you buy a car, you can design your own car right down to the last detail. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be different than a million other cars.
Right.
And here you get the cell phones, and you walk in the store, and they've stopped selling flip phones, and they stopped. You pretty much stuck with either an Android, an Apple, or a feature phone.
Right.
And I think that's wrong. And I think we have gotten about as far as we can go with the megapixels, megahertz,
oh God, yeah,
megabits per second.
The spec race.
All of those metrics, we've gone to the limit of what we can observe or hear or sense. So I think we've gotten to the end of the hardware age, and we're going to start moving into what I call the brain age. We have lost sight of the fact that good technology is invisible. The technology should be there, it should be our slave, should be doing things for us, but we should be unaware of it. All these operating systems are really intrusive. And the most intrusive part is the concept called the app. I think the concept of the app is the most user unfriendly. Talk about throwbacks. Uh,
Why is
require,
that? What makes an app
well, think
more
about it.
user unfriendly
You
than
look at the
something else?
advertising for Android and Apple.
Yeah,
They keep competing with each other about how many million apps there are. Actually,
sure.
we're talking about maybe 1.4 million apps for each of those.
Yeah.
Now, how can any user who really wants the technology only to make his life better,
Hmm.
not not to become a techie, to become involved, how can anybody curate a million apps? It doesn't
Right.
make any sense at all. So I think we're going to start moving now, since we've gone about as far as we can go with the hardware, into this age of what does a cell phone really do to help you? How can the cell phone be an extension of your mind and body? And that I think is going to be the next. And we started that already. There are now apps, I hate to use the term, that actually try to anticipate your needs and respond to them.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Just barely starting now, but that is going to evolve.
And baked in services as well. Yeah, some of that stuff is being ingrained into the platforms as we go forward, like Google Now and Android devices and stuff, just trying to anticipate what you are going to be searching for and deliver it to you before you ask for it.
You bet. You bet.
You've
I
said
think the whole idea of the app is going to disappear.
you've said a few times over the years that you think in this same vein that when this industry matures, people are going to have many different devices for many purposes. This is sort of a common theme when with discussions with you, where it's this one size fits all device really can't do any one job very well. It does every job in a sort of mediocre way, but we've seen sort of the opposite happening right now in the marketplace as devices, shrink to, or well, first shrank and then blew up again, to these sort of all-in-one media player, camera communication device, text communication device. Do you think that trend will ultimately reverse itself, and we'll be carrying a lot of specialized devices? Because I got to tell you, this is a bit more convenient for me, even though I routinely carry two phones. Maybe I wouldn't if I wasn't in this field. So what do you think about that trend?
It's convenient, but it's suboptimal because you're not exactly telling the truth. Because I'm looking at you right now, and you got a thing stuck in your ear.
I do, and I've got a watch on, a
There you
wearable.
go. So
Yeah.
you're starting to distribute the devices already. But when you start getting, well, the watch is a good example. I'm not sure that the watches are going to be successful, but the people that I've seen that are hooked on the watch, they can't live without their watches now because they don't reach for their cell phone every minute. Are
Guilty.
you one of them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm one of them. Yeah. Yeah. No question.
And well, now I'll do my
Sure.
research.
Please.
Do you actually use your cell phone less? I mean, do you reach for it fewer times now because you got your watch on?
Yes, it surprised me a number of years ago when I first wore my first watch because, yeah, it surprised me the number of notifications I received that I didn't have to act on. Like somebody liked your post or somebody left a comment. Not every time do I need to respond. So it's nice to say, oh, okay, that's nice. And I go back to my business rather than pulling my phone out. So yes, I do find it more convenient.
Yeah, well, so I have to say, Michael, that you are already starting a trend, and that is you're starting to distribute the devices.
Hmm.
Turns out that your arm is more convenient to you than reaching for the cell phone. A very subtle difference, but it's those subtleties that create new industries. But when you start doing things like measuring your heart rate or measuring the fluid in your lungs,
Hmm.
you can't do that with a cell phone. And in fact, I really ought to start from the beginning. This cell phone is a suboptimal phone. Get this flat piece of plastic and sticking it up to your face.
Oh yeah,
It
it's very uncomfortable. Yeah,
doesn't
absolutely.
make any sense at all. So if you start by trying to optimize every device, that every function that the phone does, you find out that maybe you will start distributing things in different ways for different people. So some people will want a device that they're listening to. Other people will have glasses, and they will think that the wristwatch is very inconvenient,
Hmm.
which it really is. Your arm is way down there, your eyes and ears are up here. Why would you put something down there that You want your eyes and ears to
So,
access.
will you be picking up the next iteration of Google Glass? Then, will we see that on your head in the next interview?
Yeah, well, I try everything, but I don't know if I'm becoming less flexible, but it's getting harder and harder to keep up with the technology.
In terms of where it's been progressing, we talk a little bit about the suboptimal form factors and stuff like that. But what about the communication itself? Phones are less and less voice centric over time, and that's why a device like I'm holding, which if you're listening to the audio version of this, folks, is a Galaxy Note 5. You're holding it up to your head is very uncomfortable, but no one really talks on the phone anymore, and that's a horrible generalization. But more often than not, when I see people in public using a mobile device, they're texting or they're browsing the web or something like that. I mean, does it ever seem I don't know, cumbersome to you that these less efficient means of communication are supplanting a more straightforward voice call?
Well, they would be. They're not less efficient if people are using them that much. So I think texting for people that really understand how to text, for what it does for short communications, it's very efficient. People do naturally tend toward becoming more efficient. So if they are starting to text, I give them credit for that. A lot of things they can't do just because the manufacturers don't provide that. We're still experimenting, we're trying things out, and little by little, now that we're getting off of this kick about megapixels, megahertz, megabits per second, and starting to work on how do you make somebody's life better. That is the definition of what technology is. It's the application of science to create products and services that make people's lives better.
Just a question on invention. This is an interesting thing that I've been thinking about recently. I read a book about the invention of television by Philo Farnsworth and the sort of struggle for control with RCA and everything. And there was this thing about a century ago where the lone inventor was a concept. Now you are today recognized as the father of the cellular phone. But you invented the phone while heading up a team of people working together in a large corporation. Do you think that individual inventors are still? Is there any hope for that model, or are corporations just the only way forward for real earth-shattering innovation?
Well, the revolutions are still happening. I mean, Google didn't start with a huge corporation. They started with a couple of guys sitting in a room trying to figure out a new way of searching. So there is still the opportunity, but to do the big things, you end up having to have lots of money and lots of people to do it. So I don't think that has changed anywhere from what the past was. There are still lots of inventors around. There are people that are trying to be creative. That's what the app industry is all about. These are all creative people that are inventing things. But the really big inventions take tons of money. And I'm involved. I'm on the boards of companies, and I have friends who have invented things. And if you want to do something really startling, a change in paradigm, it takes tons of money, but it also takes enormous patience. And the world is fundamentally conservative. People don't want to do things differently. So if you want to break the barriers, you really have to have a lot of perseverance and money and patience.
You once made a prediction about the future of this industry, which I think was rather prescient. A number of years ago, you said, we'll take a picture with the push of a button and it'll appear on our website in seconds for our friends and family to enjoy. You'll download a 5-minute song in 20 seconds directly to a device that plays the song, or games. Imagine a kid in Shanghai and a kid in Cleveland playing together with absolutely no geopolitical barriers. Someone still has to figure out how to charge you for all these things, but they will. First of all, that's some vision.
Did I say that, really?
You did say that, yeah.
I do recall that. By the way, do you have the source of that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to send you the link.
Grateful if you would do that.
Sure.
Well, I think there are 3 revolutions that are starting to happen now, and that by 2030, it'll be a lot sooner, they're going to have enormous impact. We are still in the game stage. Twitter and most of the things you do on the cell phone, even email. If you think about it, what's the big advantage of reading email on your cell phone when you're going to be in your office or someplace where you can see the email on a real screen? But healthcare, uh, uh, there are now sensors and health technology available that will sense diseases before they happen. And what if you could sense that one of these things is getting out of control before it actually is in control of your body and zap it? Much easier than waiting until your cancer spreads throughout your body. The sooner you catch a cancer, as an example, the better.
Sure.
What if you could stop the cancer when it was just a few cells starting it out of control? The only barrier we've got, I shouldn't say only because it's a big barrier, is developing sensors that are sensitive enough and understanding what's going on. Well, that's already progressing in a really meaningful way. People will be wearing devices, or they'll have them implanted, that will talk through their cell phone, which is now not a cell phone anymore. I call it a server.
Yeah, it's a personal hub, really.
I'm going to write that down. Personal hub. I'll try to give you credit for that one. Yeah,
but yeah, it's where we route everything through.
And
right?
you'll have all of these optimal devices.
Mhm.
You'll have a phone maybe embedded behind your ear. You'll have a visual device that might be right on your
Cornea.
eye,
Yeah.
or maybe a better form of Google Glass. So, and all these things are things that you picked. They're optimized for you because you want them, because they help you become an individual.
Is
And
there
that is really what the future cell phone is.
Is there a boundary across which you personally won't go? I know I've said that when we get to implantable stuff, you can probably count me out. I don't think I would be terribly comfortable with a voice communicator, a phone embedded in my ear. But is there anything? I mean, do you have any compunctions about that, or would you do it tomorrow?
Well, just think about this. You know, I used to be a tennis player.
Okay.
Show you my little scar here. I've got a titanium plate in my wrist.
Wow.
It took about maybe an hour in the hospital to put this thing in, and I went home.
Is that all?
And I got my wrist is now perfectly good. If you can get this phone that I described behind your ear injected in 5 minutes at the Verizon store, why would you object to that?
You know,
You won't even notice it.
this is true.
And think of what you're going to have. You're going to have this super powerful computer back here that you can call on anytime instead of reaching for your phone.
Right, it can be
thinking about-
surreptitious as well. I can just
And
call
this-
it up, and no
And
one
this
would get it.
computer stuck behind your ear is attuned to you. It learns your vocabulary, your ways of thinking, anticipates your needs, and it's there all the time.
So you would go for it. You would have no problem at all if that were available tomorrow.
I wouldn't even think about it. But I'm going to wait till the technology is a little mature, because they're going to make mistakes on the way.
They sure
I don't
are.
want to be one of the mistakes.
No, I don't want a version 1 thing in my head either.
No betas.
No. I grew up, and this is going to lead to a famous question you get all the time. I grew up watching Star Trek, and I loved the handheld communicators on the show, and the fact that I now have them in real form in the real world, it makes me very happy. But you were cited for many years as saying that Star Trek was your inspiration for some of the work you did on the first phone. But then I saw in another interview that you debunked that in fact we had another fiction property to thank. Which one was it? Was it Star Trek or was it Dick Tracy?
Well, it really was Dick Tracy. The culture we had was, as I mentioned before, people are naturally, fundamentally, inherently mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And who figured that out? It was Dick Tracy figured that out. Star Trek came along much, much later, 1965.
Right.
But by 1965, we were into it. We were building radio pagers. The IBM serviceman was now on call with a pager. There were no cell phones.
Right.
So, people were, as I mentioned before, using two-way radios in airports. We figured it out then, and we were just dying to build a wrist phone. because Dick Tracy had one. And finally, I got to the point where I could make one that was maybe as big as your fist, was a very big wrist phone. But was
Well,
on
you
the
did.
wrist.
You built
I'll
one
be
in the
damned
lab.
if Dick Tracy didn't come up with a wrist video phone. The Star Trek thing happened because there was a movie that was how William Shatner changed the world.
Oh,
They came over to my house and they got me hooked on this being an actor, and they had me flipping a flip phone up and down. Uh,
oh,
Supposed to be the Star Trek communicator,
right, yeah.
and we started a myth. And boy, is it hard to kill a
It
myth.
sure is. I think I might have seen that documentary. As a matter of fact, to come to think of it.
Thought it was terrible, but I thought I was pretty good.
Finally, we talked about you carrying a lot of phones, and I know I don't know if you still do. This was about 5 years ago that I read that you always had a lot of phones around. At the time, you had a first generation Droid. Everyone's dying to know what you carry today, and if you carry multiples, what you'd have to narrow it down to.
Well, I do. I still carry multiple phones. Let's see if I would.
Oh yeah, that's the Moto X
That's,
2014.
it's my third one because I really am kind of nuts about the
The wood back.
wood back and
Oh
the
yeah.
personalized. But that's not the reason that I use them. I've been using a Moto X now for maybe 9 months. They are trying to do these anticipatory apps.
Yeah.
So, I just wiggle this thing and my phone is now a
And
camera.
the camera starts up, and you chop it twice, you've got a flashlight. As a matter of fact, I'm very familiar with the because I carry the same phone. I've carried the Moto X for 2 generations now as my personal.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Do you use these anticipatory features?
I do, and you can chop it twice for the flashlight, and chop it again to. Have you done that one?
I'll work on that after.
It takes.
Oh, it is on
Yeah,
there.
see, there you go.
I'm not sure how long I'm going to do that because new features come out all the time. The next big thing that I'm looking for is the concept of charging. I think is archaic. The idea of having to plug a phone in, and so this is with full disclosure. I just joined the board of a company that's I think has the ultimate solution to charging, and that is don't do anything. Just walk into a room and your phone charges. So they call it far field charging.
Yes.
I think that that's going to ultimately be the only way. Why? Because if we get to this world that I described, where you've got a phone on your glasses, and one behind your ear, and a patch on your body, and a fitness device on your wrist, how are you going to keep those things charged? You're not going to plug them all in at night.
Right.
So
it's great timing. I'm sorry. We were just talking about this morning. We have a weekly podcast, and we were just discussing the future of wireless charging, and that far field charging solution was that we probably talk about that once a month. I think it's one of these holy grails in our field. Because battery capacity, it's batteries constantly need to be topped up, and people don't seem sufficiently engaged by the short-range wireless charging pads that we have now, even though I love them. So
yeah, the company is Energis, and if you're a techie, super ingenious stuff. I mean, we're talking about taking energy from a little box somewhere in a room and putting it right on your cell phone and no place else. That is wonderful technology.
I don't know if you still do trade show appearances or anything like that, but any chance you'll be accompanying them to do an in-person demonstration anytime soon?
Never know. I mean, if you haven't figured it out, Michael, I'm the ham of the world. So give me a stage and I'm on it.
I will continue looking for those stages then, and please let me know the next time you're going to appear on one.
Good.
Was something delivered to the tablet key, and I wanted one so bad. 3 years later, thanks to eBay, I finally got my wish. And well, it sure is something. In retrospect, the tablet key is a very strange product, and much of that strangeness worked against it. But open its dual 5.5-inch displays did their best to form a single